I will give some instructions in French first. Je vais vous donner les instructions pour la traduction, pour l'interprétation simultanée. Donc, pour utiliser l'option, vous devez cliquer sur le bouton Interprétation en bas de votre écran à droite et choisir la langue de votre choix entre le français et l'anglais, parce qu'aujourd'hui, la conférence sera principalement en anglais. So now I'm going to switch in English. To use the simultaneous interpretation, you must click on the interpretation button at the bottom right of your screen and choose the language of your choice between French or English. So I will start by saying thank you very much to Soleil Launière, the singer of the beautiful song called Era. Soleil, she's from Innu Nation, the community of Mashturiach. And as you may know, we always start our conferences with an Indigenous language song in the context of the Indigenous Languages Decade. So today I have the honor to welcome Senator Yvonne Boyer. Thank you, Miigwech. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation today. I'm going to start with your introduction. So Senator Yvonne Boyer is a member of the Métis Nation with her ancestral roots in the Métis Nation, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the Red River. With a background in nursing, she has over 26 years of experience practicing law and publishing extensively on the topics of Indigenous health and how Aboriginal rights and treaty law intersect on the health of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. Prior to her appointment at the Senate of Canada in 2018, as the first Indigenous person to represent Ontario in the Red Chamber, congratulations, she was the Associate Director for the Center for Health, Law, Policy, and Ethics, and a part-time professor in the Faculty of Law at the University of Ottawa. So I welcome you to Université du Québec and Abitibi-Témiscamingue today. And we will talk about a very sensitive issue. I would like to advise everyone. It could be difficult to hear some of the topics of the day. So the bill S-228, an act to amend the criminal code, sterilization procedures. That's the title of the talk of today. So, dear Senator Boyer, I would like to hear a little bit about the background of all the work you have been doing since more than 12 years now, starting with a report that you published back in 2017 with Dr. Barlett. Can you please talk to us a little bit about that period of time?
I will. Thank you. And thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today, Susie. I'm always wanting to jump at the chance to spend time with you to talk about our similar issues and trials and tribulations sometimes. So thank you for that beautiful song as well. And the introduction was lovely. So I'm honored and I'm pleased to be here today with you. So you've given a bit of a bio about me, and my background is in law and in health. And my whole life I've been advocating in both of those fields, and mostly around reproductive justice and eliminating or trying to eliminate and address healthcare that is discriminatory and is racist. So to start off, to answer your question, the day happened in 2015 where I'm busy working and I received a call from a reporter that I knew in Saskatoon, Betty Ann Adam from the Star Phoenix. She basically said, hey, I've got two women here who are Indigenous who said that they've been sterilized without their consent in the same hospital in Saskatoon. What do you think about that? And I was shocked. I spat out, well, that's terrible. You can't sterilize people against their will without their consent. It's against the law. It's criminal. It's against international law. It's against Indigenous law. It's an assault. and it's a battery, and it can't happen. But indeed, we know that it did happen. So Betty Ann published the first article in 2015, and the two women that came forward were Tracy Benab and Brenda Pelche. And I honor these women by saying their names every time I speak on these issues, because I pay them respect, because they paid heavily for being the very first two that came forward. These brave women, they stood up for themselves at a great cost and told the world what had happened to them. And we're all here today studying this issue right now because of them and their courage to stand up and speak. So after the first article came out, Susie, another woman came forward, and then another one, and another one, and another. And soon there was 11 who publicly said that they'd been sterilized without their consent in the same hospital. Tracy and Brenda were battered by violent racist attacks in social media. And because so many women came forward, things were very, very tense in Saskatoon, and it was evident there was a big problem in the Saskatoon hospital. So shortly after the articles were published, I was contacted by the Saskatoon Health Region themselves. And they asked me if I would be willing to do an external review on their tubal ligation practices, or the policies. And by this time, I had done several interviews across Canada about the issues. And I had said the same thing that I had said when Betty Ann Adam first contacted me. I said, it's wrong. It's against the law. You cannot sterilize people without their consent. So I told the Saskatoon Health Region when they called me that I think you may have made a mistake in calling me, because I've done interviews all across the country saying what you do is wrong, wrong, wrong. And I even sent them the links, and they said, we know, but the elders have asked for you. So that changed things for me. I said I would consider it, but I would like to do it on my own terms. I would like the report to be public. I would like the resources I asked for, and I would like a co-author of my choosing, and they agreed to all of that. I asked Dr. Judith Bartlett, who is a physician. She's Métis, and I had worked with her at the National Aboriginal Health Organization a few years before. We both knew the hospital culture and the chatter in the coffee rooms, so we were well versed. We also had a very strong network of an Indigenous network throughout Saskatoon, because I'm from Saskatchewan. I had lived in Saskatoon for a number of years, and my family is in Saskatoon. Same with Dr. Bartlett. So we embarked on putting together the criteria for doing an external review of the tubal ligation policies at the Saskatoon Health Region. And we placed notifications of these interviews where we thought that women would be meeting. We had a hotline number to call, and because our research assistant spoke Cree, she could speak to many of the women in their first language. We also had an elder with us, and this is really, really important because this laid the basis for this whole report and for all the work that we've done to this point. We had Mary Lee with us. She was critical in helping us when we started to do the interviews, because we knew it was going to be very difficult. And pre-elder Mary Lee stayed with us and came with us throughout the whole process. Every morning, Judy, Mary, and myself would pray together. We would hold hands and we would pray, and we would ask the Creator to help us get through the day. We prayed to be strong for the women and help them tell their stories so we could try to stop all of this from happening. And I really don't believe we could have done this work without prayer and assistance from Mary and the Creator. Mary's job was to be in the adjacent room if we needed her. She would come in, and quite often she did. Sometimes the women would be so traumatized by speaking, we would ask them if Mary could come help. And if they said yes, we would bring Mary in. And she would wrap her arms around them and hold them tight. And she'd tell them that she was going to hug them back together. And indeed, she did. So we finished the report, compiled the recommendations, and it was released in July 2017. This external review basically sent shockwaves across the nation and exposed not only the deep harm experienced by Indigenous women, but the systemic failures that allowed these injustices to persist, to begin and persist. The report highlighted that the survivors felt invisible, profiled, and powerless by the Canadian healthcare system. We provided recommendations in our report, including calls to action relating to support and reparations, cultural training, education, law and policy reform. The external review also laid the foundation for the class action lawsuits that are currently occurring across Canada in Saskatchewan, Alberta, Ontario, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, British Columbia, and Quebec. So shortly after co-authoring this report, I received a call from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau asking me if I would be willing to serve in the Senate of Canada. He said he'd been following my work for the past 10 years and asked if I would be willing to share it with all of Canada. So in March 2018, I was appointed to the Senate, and in September 2018, I delivered my first speech in the Senate chamber on this very topic, which received national media attention and shock and disbelief from many of my colleagues in the Senate who thought that this was a thing of the past. I introduced the topic of modern-day forced and coerced sterilization to Canada and indeed the world. So since that time, Susie, my office has become a safe haven, and many women and men have contacted me for various reasons. Sometimes I help women review their medical records to find out if they were sterilized, or I connect them with legal and health supports. My office has counted at least 12,000 women who have been sterilized without consent, but we know the real number is much higher. I've done speaking events all across Canada, and people are shocked to learn that this is still happening. Most think it's a thing of the past, but we know that eugenics were part of the legislation in Alberta and British Columbia from the 1920s to the 1970s, so it's ingrained to sterilize people sometimes against their will. Today, women are still coming forward who have been sterilized without consent. Now, I can continue and talk to you a little bit about how some of the things that I've learned as a senator, and I would be talking to you about the reports that the Senate has produced. Do you want me to keep going, or do you have a question or anything?
No, my next question was about the Standing Senate Committee on Human Rights, how this committee was set up, what this committee does, and how, the two reports you have been publishing as well.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you. That's my favorite topics. So when I became a senator, I started quickly talking to the government to ask why it's happening and what we could do and how we can stop it. And I found that the ministers were all very polite and very, very concerned, and they agreed to do workshops on racism in the healthcare system, and I attended them, and I participated in all of their workshops along with many other healthcare leaders. But for me, there was something that was missing, and I was like, what am I not quite getting here? And I had been at the Senate for a couple of years at that point, and I'd been really pushing the government to do something, but really the issue was me. They were doing what they could do. They were trying, but they didn't have the tools either. And I didn't quite have the key to make it stop until I realized that the people that the government were talking to were not survivors. So I asked, why don't you have survivors here? And I realized that they didn't know how to access them. So it was at that point that Elisa Lombard and I got together with our legal brains, and we decided if we could have all of the survivors that she knew and that I knew, if we could have them all speak with one voice. And so we brought them together on Zoom calls. And through their direction, we put together a list of objectives and launched a nonprofit corporation called the Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice. And they became a legal entity with the ability to speak with one unified voice. The work that they're doing right now is critical. I'm deeply grateful for the progress that they've made. In my role as a senator during the same time, I have been involved in raising attention to this issue, and I don't think a week has actually gone by in the last 7 years at the Senate where I haven't mentioned forced and coerced sterilization one way or another. In 2019 and 2022, the Standing Senate Committee on Human Rights completed 2 studies on forced and coerced sterilization of persons in Canada. I have been a member of the committee since the beginning, since I became a senator. And in the first study, the committee it was a general look at what is sterilization against your will in Canada? What does it look like? We heard from several experts. We heard from the government. We heard from legal. We heard from the disability community and the intersex community. We had Karen Stope. There was authors came. Elisa came. And one of the recommendations that came out of that very first report was to do a second study that would hear directly from the survivors. So the first report was published in 2019. And the second report is called The Scars We Carry, Forced and Coerced Sterilization of Persons in Canada. And that report was completed in 2022. The calls from the survivors who testified were clear. They wanted the practice criminalized, and they wanted to be able to speak with one unified voice. The study heard from the survivors directly, and it was very, very difficult because testifying at the Senate is not fun. And it was hard. These women were brave. They were very, very brave. We had women come. We had women from the Black community in Nova Scotia come, and we also had Indigenous women who had been sterilized against their will testify. But loud and clear, I heard that I was to criminalize the act of forced and coerced sterilization. Every single one said the same thing. And I had crystal clear direction on how to proceed and advance that. So I began drafting the bill with the Senate law clerks, and in June 2022, I introduced the bill to make coerced sterilization an explicit offense under the criminal code. And this was right after the survivors finished their testimony. So I introduced Bill S-250, an act to amend the criminal code sterilization procedures, and that was following both the publication of the Senate studies. So the first recommendation in the second study was to criminalize the act of forced and coerced sterilization. So I had clear direction, not just from the survivors, but I had clear direction from the Committee on Human Rights to criminalize this. So following that, for nearly 2 years, I worked to have Bill S-250 passed in the Senate. And in October 2024, it was unanimously accepted at third reading and sent to the House of Commons for review. And that was an especially memorable week at the Senate because the same week, the Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice was publicly launched at the Senate of Canada, and we made history. And that's when things started really pulling together. But with the prorogation of Parliament and an election, Bill S-250 died. So where it is now, we had to start all over again. And that was hard because S-250 had been unanimously accepted and passed into the House. But because it hadn't been introduced in the House yet, it died.
Yeah.
But I have good news, though. I have good news coming.
If I just may ask you, yeah, just a minute. You said that the bill was accepted unanimously, which is rare, I guess, at the Senate. Can you tell us a little bit about the process, how it works, and?
Well, when a bill is introduced, I introduced that bill in June 2022, and it was read into the first reading is just introduced. The bill becomes an actual bill, and it has to go through 3 readings. It goes through the first reading, the introduction, and then the second reading will be I would be speaking as the sponsor, and the critic would be speaking as the critic of the bill. I had a friendly critic. It was Conservative member Senator David Wells. He was a friendly critic and a good support. And then in second reading, we would ask that it would go into committee for further study. So that's the purpose of the second reading. And it was sent to Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee, where it was studied. We probably had, maybe 15 witnesses come forward, and the bill was really studied in depth, and at that time we made amendments on it and brought it back to the committee, and they looked at the amendments and said, we like the amendments, what you've done, you've made it. I brought it down from 54 lines down to 11 and made it much more concise and clear, so there was no ambiguity in it whatsoever. And I listened to what the committee said, and I listened to what the witnesses said about what their concerns were, and that is what we did with the law clerks and the Department of Justice, is made it into a smaller, much more concise bill. And then when that happened, the committee unanimously passed it. And then we brought it back into the Senate for third reading, where the whole Senate unanimously passed it to go over to the House. And that's where it went in October 2024. And that was a very wonderful day, except it just stayed there. It sat there until last fall. And when it was revived again, when we got a new government, the election happened, we got a new government, and I was the first one in the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee bugging people to get this bill, let's get it revived again. We got a new number on it. We got exactly the same bill, S-250, that was passed into the House in October 2024. Is now Bill S-228, exactly the same, no changes whatsoever. And it lays out in the criminal code that sterilizing someone without their consent is a breach of the code. And the bill is simple and it's to the point. And it was reintroduced into the Senate on June 5th, 2025, and it completed second reading in the Senate quickly, just 2 weeks later on June 16th. Then it was referred to be studied at Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee, and it was approved unanimously by that committee on September 2025. So then we have it passing into third reading on October 2nd, 2025, and unanimously it was supported and it was sent to the House of Commons a year later. So then it's out of my hands, it goes into the House of Commons, and it has to go through the same process as what it just went through in the Senate. And the words that in that bill have to be exactly the same. There can't be any amendments because it would have to come back to the Senate then. So MP Jamie Schmale then took it for first reading in the House of Commons on November 18th, 2025. It was sponsored by MP Jamie Schmale, who I had been working with over the last 2 years before, who was always going to take it. He's been very supportive and he's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful to work with. So now we are expecting second reading to take place on February 26th, 2026, like next week. And after it goes into second reading, it'll be studied the same as it was in the Senate. It'll be studied at the House of Commons and returned to the House for third reading, where we hope that the process can be finished before June and that Bill S-228 will become law by then. So that's it.
Wow. congratulations for all that work. I know what it means. And yes, as you said, it's difficult to testify at the Senate, but it's an essential work to do for sure. And for the information of everyone online, we put into the chat all the reports that Senator Boyer just talked about in French and in English, and as well as the link to read the bill itself. And you can choose a language of your choice, of course. So all that material is online and of course available. You mentioned the second reading next week on February 26th, and that's, I guess, something we can watch online. Is it?
Yes, you can watch it online. There's a link. It's called Parlview, PARL-VU, and it has a link in there that you can watch. I think we're starting at 5:30, but the times sometimes are fluid, so just kind of keep an eye on it.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
I'm not. I mean, it changed from the 24th to the 25th to the 26th now, so we've had some changing, and it might get bumped again if there's votes. So we're just not sure.
Okay, so then we have to stay alert.
Alert
on the agenda. And you mentioned February 24th. I believe it's the day, the new national day for.
Yes, the Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice is having a day of action. Day of action on February 24th, and they have done a wonderful job as far as letter writing to the MPs and calls to the MPs, and there's going to be a ceremony on Parliament Hill, and it's them that's organizing it all. I'm not quite sure all of the agenda, but maybe if Veronica has that, she could put that in the chat too. Some information about that. I see she's here.
Yeah, we already shared the link to the circle itself, so I guess we can easily find all the information online. And I saw some posts about this February 24th national day of action.
That's right. Yes, I think it's very exciting because most of the time bills don't get all this excitement. So there's a lot of people who are very concerned, and this affects a lot of people. So I'm very glad that it is getting so much attention.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Knowing the issue a little bit, because I also have been working on imposed sterilizations of Indigenous women, as you know. When I talk about this issue with people, they're still very surprised today, saying that, what, that happened in Canada? Are you serious? And I'm like, well, yes, unfortunately, yes. And about the bill itself, some people were telling me, like, do we really need to go through to a new bill to criminalize these actions? And I said, well, yes, but as I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge either. Can you tell us a little bit more about this, the mechanical, the necessity of this bill?
Mm-hmm. That's always a very good question, and it's a logical question, because I would say this. I would ask the same thing. Well, don't we have protections in the law right now? And we do have protections. You can't sterilize people against their will. It's an assault. I mean, it's against the law. It's exactly what I told Betty Ann Adam when she first said that to me, as no, you can't do that. But the issue is the issues are complex on why people are still sterilizing people against their will and not having any repercussions. And historically, I mean, we can go back and look at the trust system between Indigenous people and the justice system. And I do know that at one time over these last few years, I spoke with the commissioner, the RCMP commissioner, about this, who was all of a sudden concerned and wanting to press charges against people who were sterilizing other people against their will. And she put a call out for Indigenous women to contact them. And the next thing I know, I'm getting calls because the police are at these women's doors and they're scaring them. They're telling them they've got to, you've got to tell us who did that to you. We're going to go charge them. And the women were terrified of the police at the door. So, I mean, there's a problem. There's a problem there. I believe that this bill is going to deter people from sterilizing without consent. And that's one of the main purposes is I want to see the education throughout all of the all the medical systems, the hospitals. I want to see the education about the bill. I want this issue to be brought front and forward to people in the healthcare system so that they are aware of this and that they are taking positive action so this doesn't happen in the first place. I don't want to punish anybody, but people that are doing this have to be stopped. But I think we can do it in a positive way as well. Is let's get education systems out there, and I know that the Survivor Circle is equipped to do that, and I know that that's on their agenda as well. So I think that's important too. And yes, the bill shouldn't have to be created. It shouldn't be, because this shouldn't be happening, but it is happening. And women, as you and I both know, women are being sterilized against their will. So something has to happen.
Yeah.
But I got just one more thing I want to say on that. I think it has to be, this is just one approach. The law is just one. We need a holistic approach. We need education, and we need consent. We need proper consent forms. We need proper people to understand what they're consenting to. There's work that I've done in BC with the First Nations Health Authority, going into the hospitals and revising their consent forms so that they're culturally appropriate and trauma informed. So there's so much that needs to be done, and I know you know that, but it's something that that this is one tool. This law is one tool. There's lots of tools out there.
Exactly. From the study I did in Quebec, we heard many testimonies from women that they knew they had a tubal ligations or hysterectomia. They find out years later by going back to the doctor to check out something else. And then, by the way, madam, you have been sterilized 4 years ago. So this is why in Quebec we use the word imposed instead of coerced, which is little distinctions just to highlight this fact that they didn't even knew about it before years. So have you met similar cases in other provinces?
Yes, we have one of our senators that did a speech at third reading, Senator Amina Gerba, who went to the doctor because she had endometriosis, and the doctor was going to do an ablation. She thought the doctor was doing an ablation, but what the doctor actually did was removed her whole uterus. And she didn't know till years later. So she told the world about it at third reading speech. This happens, and it has to stop. There was no consent given for it. So there's lots of awful stories out there, and I know that if people were a little more careful, and people had something like this bill that is in the background, that they would think a little bit more carefully. If we look at the case of Andrew Kataska, was the doctor in the Northwest Territories who was the shining example he was the head of obstetrics and gynecology, and he was very polished, and he wrote consent with Indigenous people, and what he did was he sterilized a young Inuk woman without consent. And he's being sued for $6.5 million right now in a civil action. But maybe if this bill was in place, he would have thought there are repercussions if I don't get that consent. So perhaps it will stop those kind of things from happening. Again, it'll make people think. That's what I'm hoping, Susie.
Yeah, I hope that too, for sure. Um, I also heard other testimonies from women that were sharing all the pressure they received from nurses, from doctor to agree or to sign the famous piece of paper called consent or consent form. Some women were telling us that the sheet of paper was bent in two, so they couldn't read what they were pushed to sign, and often on during labor. So I guess you have also heard stories, similar stories as this one.
Yes, I've heard stories like that as well. It's all too common. I know that the women that 26% of all the women in Igloolik were sterilized, and they didn't have any English. There was no consent. So how can you possibly give consent if you can't understand the language? How can you possibly give consent if you are, you know, 4 centimeters dilated? How can you how can you give consent when you're being threatened? I've heard so many women talk about being threatened that they're going to lose the baby if they don't sign this form. And we have birth alerts as well that have, it's a red flag. Now let me just back up a little bit because people may not know what a birth alert is. In Saskatchewan and Manitoba, for sure, I'm not sure about the other provinces. There are when when you have had a contact with social services for any reason whatsoever. It doesn't have to be, because your questionable parenting is at play, but you could have any reason whatsoever. And so then when you go to deliver on your file, there's a red flag that says there's a birth alert on there because you've had some sort of contact with social services, and you're automatically suspect to be a poor parent or one to be watched or one to have your child removed. And it happens. It's so discriminatory, and it's the to me it's the extension of colonization. It's just another one of the tools that that Indigenous people have had to deal with. And in a more modern, it's modern day kidnapping. Like you've got residential schools that kidnapped all those children and did those 5 generations of damage. And now modern day kidnapping is the same thing. It's with the birth alerts. There's class action lawsuits about the birth alerts as well. I mean, fortunately there's little armies out there that are fighting these kind of things. But when you have a birth alert, it's a strike against you because they already are making you suspect, and they're going to want to force you to sign that paper. So
Yeah.
I have a daughter that is a bit worried herself, who's 22 weeks pregnant right now. She's worried. Yeah.
Oh, I see. I can confirm you that in Quebec as well, we had these birth alert, many cases, many testimonies brought these experiences to mix with sterilizations, mix with losing a baby in the health system, mix with the Kokum being a survivor of residential schools and so on. And this is bring me to believe that forced and imposed sterilization should be fully recognized as a trauma, such as the residential schools, 60 scoops, and so on. The list is too long. We won't repeat all of them, but I believe that. What do you think about this?
I
Should
think
they be added on the list?
Yes, I think definitely. And I think that now that we have a survivors group that can speak with one voice, there's power with the people. And I think that I mean, Canada's been recognized, Canada has been recognized internationally as and been told to clean up your act on sterilization. Like it's an embarrassment. And so yes, by all means, I've also heard the word genocide. And I tend to believe that as well. I I tend to believe that it does fall within the perimeters of genocide. Like, and let me explain a little bit more about that because I want to use the words of Nicole Rabbit, who is a survivor, and she talked about how her mother was sterilized against her will. Her auntie was sterilized against her will. Her niece was sterilized against her will. And they live in a fairly small Blackfoot community. So she's saying the generations are not here to take care of the elders because they haven't been born, because they're sterilized. So does that not make genocide real? So it's like it's being ghosted. They're ghosts. She said she was the only one to take care of her mama because these others haven't been born. So that's it's very real. And I think what you have said, Susie, I certainly support that and would support you making that in the same category as all the other atrocious things that have happened to Indigenous people.
Yeah. And sterilization doesn't only touch the woman herself, it touches her spouse, touch her children's, her close and extended family. It touches everyone. It does not affect only the woman who has faced this experience, but all their family slash community, I believe.
Exactly, and their nation.
And the nation, sure. Yeah, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I will go ahead with a question in the chat here from Christine Lambert, one of our students. Do you know if this is being addressed in schools or in medical programs anywhere in Canada?
Yes, I don't know about the schools, but I do know that the Survivor Circle for Reproductive Justice it will be dealing with that, and that would be in their perimeter to work with. The medical, I have been all over these years, I have met with just about as many people as I possibly could. The Indigenous physicians, of course, are completely supportive, and Canadian Medical Association, provincial, as many provincial associations I've worked with, and people are changing are adding it to their education plans. So it's coming. It's coming. It's not. I can say that it's starting, and the more we talk, the more. See, right here today we're planting seeds. I'm planting a seed here. Susie, you're planting seeds. Your students, every person that's here is going to plant another seed. And the more seeds we plant, the more people that will talk. The more people that will talk will be able to engage and get things done as well. Somebody knows somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody.
Exactly. I have some colleagues from other universities in Quebec in law, medicine, social sciences who included our first report in Quebec published in 2022 in their courses outlines. Now it's like an mandatory readings. So I have nothing to do with that, but that's what they did, and I'm pretty proud of it because, well, like you said, these issues needs to be addressed and needs to be known by all Canadians and the whole world. So, yeah.
Congratulations. I'm really happy to hear that.
Mm-hmm. I will go ahead with another question here. Does the bill address informed consent in the sense that someone under pain medication can't or shouldn't give proper consent?
That's right. That's right. Definitely. You can't, you have consent. You have to have all your faculties together to have proper consent. And same within, when you're in labor, you cannot consent. When you're under duress, you can't consent. So the bill addresses sterilization without consent.
Sorry, I'm trying to read the questions in the chat too. Um, oh, interesting one here. Do you see a difference between Quebec province and the rest of Canada? Because Quebec still refused to recognize systemic racism, which is, in my opinion, still impacts everything, especially how we address consent within Indigenous population.
Yes, I was certainly happy to meet Susie, let me tell you that, because I know when I first became a senator, the government was pulling together provincial round tables on this issue, and Quebec refused to attend because we were told there is no racism in Quebec. So I I was really happy when Susie and I met because I knew that now things were going to happen, and maybe Quebec is a little behind, but that's okay. Quebec can pick it up and go too. There's enough people in Quebec that are armed and ready and ready to roll. Let's go. Let's get this done. People in Quebec know there's racism in Quebec, and I'm sorry that we had Joyce Echaquan to tell us that. But where there was one Joyce, there's 100 more behind her that don't have that video camera. So we know what's happening. And the more we talk about it here, the more it gets spread, the more people take action and things get dealt with. So watch out, Quebec.
And you're so right to underline Joyce Echaquan unfortunate experience. And we can also add today, and we published on that about a year and a half ago, the fact that Joyce also went under obstetrical violence before her death. So yeah, we have to never forget her. That's for sure.
Never forget her.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We have like less than 9 minutes left. Um, have you ever talked or thought and talked about a possibility of holding a national inquiry about forced sterilization? Do you think that's is something that should be done?
Um, we 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 did do a national type of inquiry with the um, Prince uh, with Dr. Margot Greenwood from the Collaborating Center in Prince George and the Northern British. I'm not getting the name right, but it's coming out. We did do a national inquiry and brought everybody, people from the provinces together to discuss what to do, how to arm yourselves, and how to go back to your communities and to create dialogue and to create a plan that would address this. Now, there hasn't been a follow up after that, but in other ways, the government had put together uh, not workshops, but like commissions, almost like commissions, like 4 or 5 across the country with healthcare leaders on how to address these issues. And not just sterilization, but reproductive violence is what we're talking about because it comes in many fashions, in many ways, and so there has been national inquiries and And I expect that the survivors should be at the center of that. And if there is to be another one, that's what I would like to see, is the survivors organize it and then bring the parties together. And I'd be happy to go, and I'm sure I'd see you there too, Susie.
Sure. As you know, we are coming out very soon in March, hopefully, with our second report on imposed sterilizations and other kind of obstetrical violence amongst First Nations women in Quebec. And yeah, we will have to talk again together very soon, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
I can go maybe with one last questions in the chat. It's a question about genocide, forced or imposed sterilizations amount to genocide if there was an intent to destroy the group. Okay, that's the one who, yeah, share with us the number 5 criteria of definitions of the definition of genocide. Da, 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 da. Okay, sorry, I thought it was a question, but it's not. In fact, it's someone who reminds us the proper definition. Yeah.
We can read that out. Let's read that out.
Genocide means any of the following act committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, and religious group as such, and then imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. So this is one of the criteria that's it's targeted here today. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for whoever put that in there. That's helpful.
Yes. Mm-hmm. There's a question at the end. Okay, I don't see anything else here. Maybe if we come back about on the class action that are currently under reading, if I'm not wrong. The one in Quebec have been accepted by the court. So we talk about more than 30 Atikamekw women now that are part of this, the only one class action that is going on in Quebec right now. So we should pay attention to this class actions in the next couple of months, hopefully, maybe years, hopefully not. And do you know if any other class actions in Canada are about to be accepted or what's the word? Agreed by the court?
I know that in Saskatchewan, the class action was actually filed in October 2017. So it took, 7 years to get up to being heard. And it was rejected for a class action, but it's on appeal right now. So we should. I'm hoping that it'll be a successful appeal, and we should know about that within a few months. By the summer, we should know.
Okay.
So there's hope, and that's just one other tool. Like we talk about tools. The class action's a tool. The education is a tool. The research is a tool. The legislation is a tool, and we put all of these together, and we have we have a and fill some holes in there because I know there's lots that I'm missing, but we have a good plan to stop this from happening, for eradicating this. And maybe our children won't know. Maybe our children's children won't know anymore because it'll be done.
You're right. Yeah.
That's what I'm hopeful for.
And here is another, maybe a tool that someone bring as a question. How can we empower also men regarding that topic?
Right. Well, we have. I know I get calls from men as well, especially because I'm not sure about the correctional system, and I know that it's common in the United States that men have been sterilized against their will in the U.S., and I'm not sure about Canada, but I wouldn't be surprised. And how can we get men involved? I think that men should be involved in everything that we do because of the balance. We need their support. And sometimes men are affected almost as much as women are because it's their lives too. And genocide. I mean, genocide will be occurring and there won't be a generation to be able to produce more children unless we do stop it. So I think men should be involved. I do think that um, the men who support with the little the moose hide campaign is a very good one, and I see lots of men wearing it downtown, and I always give them a nod because you know that they've thought about it. They've thought about it. So, those are the kind of things that we can support that will support men as well.
Yeah. That's very interesting. We also have this campaign in Quebec, the little square, moose hide square that we put on our shirts. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's the moose hide. Yeah.
That's good. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have 2 minutes left, so I don't know if you would like to share a last word with us, invite maybe our students to follow the bill that should be passed soon.
Okay, that's okay. So you please follow what's going on right now. February 26th at 5:30, we are due to have Bill S-228 introduced or at second reading in the House, and there will be hopefully lots of speakers on it, and we will at least get the sponsor speaking on it, and I don't know if, and I'm probably a critic, and maybe 2 or 3 other people. So I'm hoping that we'll get lots of people speaking on it, and then effectively being sent to committee is what I'm looking for. And then once it's in committee, I'm as the sponsor of it in the Senate, I will go be the first witness. So okay. I'll go into the House and be the first witness and speak for 10 or 15 minutes and then get a whole bunch of questions. And then the department officials will come, which would be the Department of Justice. There's 2 very, very strong women who have been with me since the beginning, which I'm very happy about. And they'll be there at the House of Commons as well. And they'll be there to answer those questions about the legalities of the bill as well. So Great. that will be helpful. And then I'm hoping we can get it in and out of committee as quickly as possible, and then into third reading at the House, and then back over to the Senate for royal assent with the Governor General, and then we're going to celebrate.
So 2026 will be a big year for all of us.
It'll be a big year, Susie.
Yeah. And we will be online next week to follow that work for sure.
Fantastic. I'll see you there.
Kitsimegwech, thank you very much, Yvonne, if I may, and let's talk very soon together again.
Thank you, Susie. I look forward to it.
Merci à tout le monde. On se revoit le 26 mars prochain pour la prochaine conférence. Et voilà, nous apprécierons vos commentaires suite à cette conférence. Miigwech.
Thank you.